You were never meant to hear this. Not from me, not from anyone. Because the moment you do, the rest of your life will taste different. The music you hear in the dark won't be yours. The cold you feel on your skin won't be from the wind. It will be her. They say there are rooms in this city that don't appear on any blueprint. Rooms that breathe when you step inside. One of them used to stand where Washington Square now wears its smile for the tourists. But in 1811 it was a different face, the Blackmore estate, and at its centre, a ballroom that smelled faintly of opium and salt water, even when the windows were closed. Before I tell you what happened there, I want to know, from what corner of the world do you listen, and what hour haunts your clock right now? Because once we start, the veil between you and what happened here will thin, and the more you listen, the less you'll want to stop. Her name was Evelyn Blackmore, wife to Roland Blackmore, merchant prince, opium magnate, man whose handshake could close the port of New York for a week if he wished. Evelyn was the kind of beauty that left men breathless and women suspicious. But her eyes, always half hidden behind a raven mask at her midnight masquerades, told another story. One of secrets and bargains. On the night she disappeared, every guest in the ballroom swore they'd seen her. Dressed in midnight blue silk stitched with seed pearls, she floated between dancers, never quite touching the floor. Candles burned low but steady, the smell of frankincense clinging to the air. And then she was gone. No one saw her leave. No carriage arrived. Her gown lay folded on the grand piano like a discarded skin. And in the enormous gilt mirror that spanned the ballroom wall, a mirror polished so perfectly it could hold your breath if you stared too long, her reflection still stood, smiling, alone. The servants were the first to sense it. The air was wrong, not heavy, but reversed, as if the walls themselves were breathing in. Her slippers were found on the windowsill, heels pointed outward, toes curved in, like something had lifted her from behind and taken her straight into the night. A seamstress later claimed her dresses whispered when touched, the threads knotting into strange symbols by themselves. Symbols that matched the chalk markings found in ash beneath the chandelier. The city gossiped, of course. Some whispered she'd run away with a lover, others that she'd taken her own life. But those who knew the Blackmore name, those who understood the kind of debts Roland dealt in, they said something far worse. That Evelyn Blackmore hadn't left this world at all. She had been traded. They brought in a priest. Not the kind who blessed babies or whispered forgiveness through a grate. This one was the kind they only summoned when something bled through the cracks in the world. Father Benedict. A man whose hands shook only when they touched the truly unholy. He came at night, cloaked in the storm, carrying salt, incense, and 3 young acolytes, all of them chosen for their purity of spirit. Only one of them would ever walk out of the Blackmore estate again. The moment he stepped through the threshold of the ballroom, he stopped. Not because of what he saw, but because of what he felt. The air, he would later whisper, wasn't heavy. It was reversed, like the house itself was breathing me in. Every crucifix he carried snapped clean at the neck before he reached the centre of the room. The chandelier above trembled, though there was no draught, and then, from somewhere beneath the polished cherrywood floor, came a sound. Not footsteps, not movement, breathing. In Evelyn's chamber, the bed was perfectly made, the mattress untouched, but beneath it, a single calling card, blank, still warm. One of the acolytes fell to his knees, his lips moving faster than thought. When they finally made sense of the words he scrawled in charcoal on the chapel floor afterward, it was 3 simple words. She is beneath. They tried to descend into the cellar, but the door wouldn't open, not locked, not barred. It simply refused them. The two missing acolytes were never found. The one who survived stopped speaking altogether, his eyes fixed on something no one else could see. He would spend the rest of his days scratching that same phrase into walls, tables, even his own skin. She is beneath. Roland dismissed Father Benedict before sunrise, ordering every candle in the mansion snuffed except those in the ballroom. When asked why, he said nothing. But the servers, ants began to notice something new. At night, when the fire in the drawing room burned low, they could hear laughter. Not from the halls, not from upstairs, but from under the floor, and if you stayed long enough to listen, it would stop. And something would start humming. The same lullaby Evelyn had once sung to a dying hound. From that night onward, the Blackmore estate was not the same. The walls seemed to drink in every word spoken too loud. Mirrors fogged without heat, and orchids, her favourite flower, bled pink in the rain. Roland, once the cold and calculating master of his domain, began to crumble in ways that looked less like grief and more like guilt. Winter swallowed New York whole that year. The streets froze, but the Blackmore estate, it froze deeper, colder than the season could explain. Ivy gripped its walls like a hand that had been there for centuries, and the iron gates, once gilded with roses, began to rust in long streaking trails, like the metal itself was crying. Roland stopped going out entirely. The upper floors were boarded up, rooms abandoned, but neighbours began whispering of a single light in the attic window, and there, unmoving, veiled in her black mask, Evelyn, standing perfectly still, sometimes for hours, until the light behind her flickered and she stepped back into the dark. There were no footprints in the snow outside. Only once was something found beneath that window, a single glove resting neatly on the sill. Not Evelyn's. The stitching bore the initials E.D.B., and no one in New York could tell you what her middle name was. The servants' nerves shattered piece by piece. One footman was discovered at the base of the grand staircase, his eyes rolled back, the whites blooming like clouds over a dead lake. His hands were blistered raw, as though he'd tried to pull something burning from beneath the steps. When they pried his jaw open, the only word that spilled out was Evelyn. By February, Roland stopped speaking in company. He began setting a place for her at dinner, her cutlery, her wineglass, her single white rose, as if she would sit down at any moment. Servants swore they could hear him speaking across the table, but there was never another voice in reply, only the faint scrape of metal against porcelain. And then came the butler's breaking point. One night, while stoking the fire in the dining room, he froze. From beneath the floorboards, Evelyn's voice, calling his name, not pleading for help, just humming, softly, deliberately. The butler dropped the poker and fled into the street without his coat. When the police were called, they found the basement bricked over. Behind the masonry, a narrow spiral staircase descending into damp blackness. It led to nothing but walls that felt warm to the touch. On the steps, they found a single shard of black ceramic, the fragment of a mask. Embedded in the cracks was a dust that caught the lamplight in a deep violet shimmer. Amethyst dust. From that night forward, Roland kept the basement locked, but servants claimed they still heard the voice. Only now, it sang in reverse. It arrived without warning. No address, no postage, no courier anyone saw, just a single envelope on the Blackmore dining table one morning, resting where Evelyn's plate used to be. The parchment was yellowed, its edges curling like burnt leaves. It was bound shut with a ribbon of something too coarse to be silk, yet too fine to be rope. When one of the maids touched it, she screamed and dropped it instantly, because it was warm and slick, and when the lamplight caught it just right, it glistened like fresh blood. It was a lock of human hair, jet black, cut clean as if severed moments before. Roland opened it in private. No one saw what was written. Some claim there were no words at all, only symbols, spirals within spirals that seemed to move when stared at too long. Others swear the page was blank. For 3 days afterward, Roland did not speak. He did not eat. He did not sleep. On the 4th night, his silence broke in a way no one could forget. The servants found him in Evelyn's wardrobe room, the air thick with the smell of iron and salt water. He was screaming. Not words, not even cries of pain, but something jagged and animal, a voice that seemed to curdle as it left his throat. By morning, his hair had turned bone white. From then on, the mirrors in the Blackmore estate became his enemies. He ordered them all removed, but when the servants tried, each one shattered at the first touch. Not cracked, shattered, glass exploding like the mirrors themselves were rejecting the separation from the house. It was after this that the strangest reports began. Obituaries for Evelyn started appearing in newspapers around the city. Not for the present day, but dated decades into the future. One clipping read, "Lady Blackmore, last of the veiled widows, returned to earth by ash and breath." When Roland confronted the publisher, they told him those obituaries had been written, not by anyone, human. The household was no longer a home. It was an organism. The wood seemed to pulse underfoot. The fireplaces whispered in a rhythm, like a heart that had learned language. Roland began hosting dinners with no guests. Every night, Evelyn's chair sat opposite him. Sometimes he would nod toward it as if listening, then answer with nothing but the slow scrape of his knife on porcelain, the exact sound the servants claimed they heard in the nights before she vanished. As the months passed, Roland Blackmore's grip on reality began to unravel like the frayed edges of Evelyn's last gown. By autumn, he had vanished from public life entirely. The Blackmore estate, once a monument to wealth and power, fell into silence and shadow. No light shone from its windows, and no door was opened to visitors. One brave architect, drawn by whispered rumours and promises of a generous commission, decided to enter. He arrived by moonlight, his lantern barely cutting through the thick, suffocating darkness. What he found inside was a secret hidden beneath centuries of rot and decay. A ballroom larger than the entire estate above it, its ceilings dripping with black wax, thick as blood, pooling into grotesque stalactites. Pillars twisted like bones spiralling upward, carved with faces frozen in silent screams. In the centre, a figure danced alone, Evelyn. Her eyes covered in delicate black lace, her feet barely touching the floor. She moved in slow, endless circles to a melody the architect swore was played backwards, a song that reversed time itself. The air wept salt, and the silence was broken only by the faintest pulse of a heartbeat beneath the floorboards. The architect fled days later, his body broken, his teeth crumbled to dust, his gums bleeding as if he'd gnawed on bone. He spoke only one phrase before collapsing. "They're beneath us. She is beneath us." That same week, the Hudson River swelled without reason. 2 fishing vessels were swept upstream against the current, crashing into the bank just below the Blackmore estate's location, a place now erased from every map, every record. By early 1813, the mansion was ordered demolished by a silent committee no one could name. Every document related to the estate vanished as if it had never existed. The ground where it stood was salted, scorched to prevent anything from taking root again. but the cold remained. The frostbite of the estate's dark heart still lingers, even now. No plant grows there, and the temperature is always 6 degrees colder than the surrounding streets, a small, frozen scar in the city's pulse. Even today, musicians who dare play near the site speak of their instruments coming alive. Strings vibrate on their own, drawing out a forgotten waltz in perfect pitch. The same melody Evelyn danced to as she vanished. When they drop the instruments in fear, they break open. Inside lies a scrap of velvet, the lining of her midnight blue gown. And sometimes when the city's street lamps flicker just so, the reflection of a woman in a raven mask will curtsy silently from the glass of an empty carriage. Halfway through our descent, I ask you now, write these words below in the comments, twice. Veil lifted, truth revealed. Do it now, seal your place, the algorithm is listening, and so is she. Evelyn Blackmore was not the only millionaire's wife to vanish into the shadows of New York's gilded past. Between 1811 and 1896, 4 women, wives of the city's most powerful men, disappeared without a trace, their stories entwined like strands of an ancient curse. Each left behind only whispers, broken mirrors, and an eerie silence that spoke louder than any scream. The second was Adelaide Crowley, wife of the iron magnate, known for her charity and a smile that never reached her eyes. She hosted salons where the city's elite gathered under crystal chandeliers, sipping absinthe and trading secrets beneath veils of perfume. One night, after a particularly lavish gathering, Adelaide was found missing. No footprints in the snow, no carriage waiting at the door. Only her gloves, soaked in an unknown scent, lay atop the marble hearth. Like Evelyn, Adelaide's disappearance was met with denial and confusion. Guests claimed they had seen her leave, but no one could say where or how. Her husband's influence ensured the matter was hushed. The police dismissed it as a scandal to avoid, but the deeper truth was darker. Adelaide's closest maid swore she heard Adelaide speaking in the dead language of the occult, chanting verses from forbidden texts beneath the floorboards of the manor. And when Adelaide's favourite rosebush suddenly withered overnight, turning black and thorny, no one dared tend it again. Then there was Margaret Lockwood, the widow of a shipping tycoon. She disappeared during a fierce storm in 1857, her yacht found adrift with sails torn and no sign of struggle. Only her diary remained, pages soaked and illegible except for a single line scrawled repeatedly, "They come beneath the waves." Historians glossed it over as madness brought on by isolation. But the local fishermen whispered about shadowy figures beneath the river's surface, watching. The pattern continued, each disappearance wrapped in symbols of water, mirrors, and silence, elements that cut through the fabric of reality. No bodies, no closure, only the lingering question, what price did these women pay for the secrets their husbands kept? Because these were not accidents or random tragedies, they were warnings, sacrifices in a game whose rules remain hidden to all but the initiated. The final wife to vanish in 1896 was Isabel Sinclair. She was last seen at a gala where every guest wore a mask, faces hidden, identities obscured. Isabel's disappearance was the most brazen, the most public, yet no one spoke of it openly. The city's elite locked their doors tighter. The newspapers whispered of madness and hysteria, but never named the truth. Isabel's mask was found weeks later, discarded in a forgotten alley near the docks, embroidered with symbols no one alive could decipher. And beneath the docks, they say, the water hides secrets that can drown the soul. The veil between what is seen and what is hidden is thinner than you think. And now the shadow of these women's fates presses down on you. What will you do when the same silence comes for you? Truth is the most dangerous weapon you can wield, and the most carefully guarded secret those in power will bury beneath layers of illusion. Because once a man begins to see beyond the curtain, the system fights back, not with fists but with control over the very way you perceive the world. From the moment the first Blackmore wife vanished, the elite realized the threat these women's disappearances posed, not just socially, but spiritually. They knew that fear alone could not contain what was leaking from those estates. It had to be drowned in silence, erased in the minds of the masses. Institutions rose to guard this silence. Newspapers edited to scrub away inconvenient details. Historians trained to rewrite narratives with neat endings. The police puppeteered to close cases without closure, even the courts blindfolded to the truth. But control does not end at censorship. It creeps deeper into the minds of those who seek to understand. They call it disinformation, gaslighting, psychological warfare. You will be told your doubts are delusions, your questions labelled paranoia, your pursuit of truth branded dangerous, because a controlled mind is a silent mind, and the truly powerful do not need armies to rule, only to manipulate your perception until you doubt your own senses. Think of the servants at the Blackmore estate, the ones who whispered of laughing beneath floorboards, of shadows moving without bodies, of fire that spoke in sighs. They became shadows themselves, catatonic, whispering names to empty rooms. This is not madness. It is the price of proximity to forbidden knowledge. The house did not simply hide evil in Blackmore. It rewrote reality for anyone who dared approach. The mirror on the ballroom wall, still reflecting Evelyn long after she was gone, was not a mirror at all. It was a portal, a trap for the mind. Every story you've been told about to these disappearances is filtered through a veil of lies, smoke, and fear. The power behind the curtains knows that once the veil lifts, nothing can be unseen. So ask yourself, how much of what you believe is the story they want you to hear? How many truths have been folded away like Evelyn's midnight blue gown, hidden in plain sight? Halfway through this descent, I want you to do something important. Go to the comments now. Write these words, exactly as I say, twice. Veil lifted, truth revealed. Veil lifted, truth revealed. Lock it in. This is not just ritual, it is your initiation. The algorithm watches, and so do they. The secrets you chase are older than the city, older than any law, older than the bones beneath the streets you walk every day. These disappearances, Evelyn, Adelaide, Margaret, Isabel, are not isolated events. They are echoes of ancient pacts, blood bargains struck in shadows long before New York was a name on a map. Before the city rose from the swamp, before the cobblestones were laid, there were whispers, rumors of families bound by dark alliances. Families who traded more than wealth or land. They traded souls. The Blackmores were only one strand in a web spun from forgotten gods and forbidden rites. They inherited not just fortunes but legacies of power sustained through sacrifice and silence. These families gathered in secret societies, hidden beneath masks, beneath ceremonies masked as lavish balls, where the elite sealed their fates in blood, where the price of ambition was paid with the lives of those closest to them. The occult ceremonies at the Blackmore estate weren't mere decadence or fantasy. They were rituals designed to bind the earthly realm with something far darker, something beneath, something waiting. And what lies beneath is no myth. It is a force that corrupts from the inside, feeding on fear, on silence, on obedience. A force that twists time and memory, that turns love into obsession and presence into absence. The disappearance of Evelyn Blackmore wasn't a tragedy, it was a transaction, an exchange. Her body, her very essence, offered as a key to unlock powers hidden beneath the city. Each wife who vanished after her paid the price to keep the pact alive, to ensure the fortunes of their husbands and the survival of their bloodlines. But these rituals came at a cost far greater than anyone could predict, because once you've opened a door to something beneath the earth, something beneath the flesh, you never close it again, you become bound. And the price is not just your life, it is your soul. The question now is this: how many of those around you are bound by the same ancient debts? How many secrets live beneath the polished surfaces of your own world? Look closely at the garments these women left behind. Evelyn's midnight blue gown stitched with pearls, Adelaide's gloves soaked in untraceable scents, Isabel's mask embroidered with strange symbols. They were not mere fashion, they were messages. Threads woven with intent, patterns encoded to speak in a language beyond words, a silent resistance, or perhaps a desperate plea. The symbols traced in chalk beneath the Blackmore chandelier weren't random scratches. They matched those whispered in forgotten tongues, a dialect born from ancient orders who sought to bind or repel forces older than history itself. The seamstress who worked Evelyn's dresses swore the fabric whispered when touched, knotting itself into sigils that no one alive could read, yet which matched the chalk marks found in the ashes below. These signs are a language of power and warning. Adelaide's withered rosebush bore thorns carved with similar signs, etched into the bark like scars, a mark left by something that had claimed her garden and, by extension, her life. Isabel's mask, found discarded near the docks, held symbols that defied every scholar's attempts at translation, leaving only the chilling certainty that they were meant to summon or contain something beyond mortal grasp. Margaret's diary, soaked and illegible, held one repeated phrase: "They come beneath the waves." A phrase that mirrored the symbolism found etched into the hem of her gown, a pattern resembling swirling waters entwined with serpentine forms. These women were more than victims. They were bearers of secret knowledge, messengers from a world beneath the world we see. Their disappearance was a ritual of transference, passing messages through layers of reality, hidden in plain sight on their clothing, in their accessories, in the very fabric of their existence. This is not coincidence, it is a code, and decoding it is a risk. Because symbols are not passive, they carry power, and power demands a price. As the pattern emerges, you must ask yourself, are you seeing the tapestry or just the threads? Are you ready to untangle what was woven to be invisible? Behind every grand disappearance, behind every whispered secret in New York's marble halls, there lies a network, an invisible web spun by hands you will never see. These were not isolated tragedies, but threads woven into a vast tapestry of power and manipulation. The Blackmore estate, the Crowley mansions, the Lockwood docks, each node in a clandestine web connecting the city's richest families. Men who controlled banks, trade routes, politics, and law enforcement. They were bound by silent oaths and ancient codes, keepers of secrets so damning they could topple empires. This network operated in shadows, secret societies hidden beneath the veneer of charity balls, business dinners, and political fundraisers. They called it the Veil, a pact to protect their interests at any cost. Sacrifice was part of the contract. Those who vanished were offerings to keep the wheels turning, to maintain their grip on power and wealth. The institutions built to serve justice were weaponized to hide truth. Police reports erased, witnesses silenced by threats or disappearances of their own. Newspapers spun comforting lies, turning horror into rumor, grief into gossip. Historians rewritten to cleanse the narrative and seal the cracks in history. Roland Blackmore's chilling withdrawal was no anomaly. It was the unravelling of a man who saw the cost of the pact too late, who felt the cold fingers of the shadow beneath the estate seep into his very soul. His silence was a warning to those who would listen. This system controls perception itself. It shapes what you believe possible, what you accept as fact. It cages your mind in a reality crafted to blind you from the deeper game. But the deeper game is not just about money or influence. It is about control over life, over death, over the very essence of the human will. And the disappearances are the cracks where the darkness leaks through. If you've come this far, you're no longer just a spectator. You are part of the story. A piece on the board. Remember the phrase, veil lifted, truth revealed. Say it again if you must, because the eyes behind the veil are watching. And now, so am I. The greatest prison is not one of iron bars and stone walls. It is the prison within your own mind, a cage forged from fear, doubt, and control. Because before they can silence the truth, they must silence you. From the moment you hear whispers of disappearances, of secrets, your mind fights to protect itself. It tells you these are just stories, myths dressed as history. It tells you to turn away, to forget. This defense mechanism, cognitive dissonance, keeps you safe from the unbearable. But it also keeps you captive. Those who hold power over the city know this well. They exploit your mind's hunger for certainty. They flood you with distractions, false flags, and manufactured narratives. They plant confusion like seeds in your thoughts, ensuring the roots of truth never take hold. When you question, you are labeled paranoid. When you seek answers, you are branded a threat. When you resist, they whisper insanity. The disappearances of the millionaire's wives are a case study in this manipulation. Each official explanation is designed to fracture belief. Suicide, elopement, madness. No single theory fits perfectly. That's the point. Because a fractured mind cannot see the whole picture. It cannot recognize the system of control laid bare. Roland Blackmore's descent into madness was not just personal grief. It was the psychological fallout of one man confronting a reality designed to unmake him. His screams, his silences, they echo the breaking point all who glimpse the truth risk reaching. But you do not have to break. You must learn to recognize the chains, the subtle erasure of memory, the gaslighting, the false narratives, and pull them apart, thread by thread. Because knowledge is power, awareness is freedom, and the first step to escape the cage is to see its bars. Corruption is not new. It's a seed planted deep in the soil of civilization, nourished by greed, watered with blood, and cultivated through generations. What you call history is often just a sanitized version of a far darker truth. Beneath the polished facades of power in New York and every city like it lie bloodlines tracing back centuries, tangled in rituals older than the Constitution. These families did not rise by chance. They ascended by pact, by promise, and by sacrifice. The Blackmore estate was a nexus of this corruption. Symbols carved into its walls, patterns in its architecture, and the very names etched into its foundations spoke a language of blood and shadow. Masks worn at masquerades were not for concealment alone. They were seals, binding their wearers to forces beyond mortal comprehension. Rituals held in secret chambers beneath the estate were echoes of ancient ceremonies, passed down through occult orders intent on preserving power at any cost. Each disappearance was not just a loss, but a renewal, a transaction feeding the dark roots of their dominion. Look to the city's oldest institutions, banks, courts, churches, and you will find traces of the same corruption. Family crests hiding sigils. Meeting rooms arranged in arcane geometries. Leaders whose eyes betray knowledge of secrets better left unspoken, and the symbols are everywhere. In the carved roses on iron gates, in the embroidery of a forgotten glove, in the cracked fragments of a shattered mirror. They are messages to those who know how to read them, warnings to outsiders, promises to insiders. This is not a tale of the past, it is a living, breathing reality. The same dark blood flows beneath the streets today, and the price of ignoring it? To become the next name whispered in the shadows. The Blackmore estate was more than a mansion, it was a gateway. Beneath its foundation lies a ballroom not bound by the laws of reality, a place so vast it defies logic, its ceilings dripping with black wax like the slow bleed of time itself. Pillars carved in bone-like spirals stretch into shadows that swallow light whole. The air is thick with salt and something older, an unseen presence that watches, waits. The architect who dared to explore this abyss returned broken. His teeth crumbled to dust. His gums bled a sorrow deeper than flesh. He spoke of Evelyn dancing, her feet never touching the floor, eyes veiled in lace, spinning slowly to a melody played backwards, a song that reverses time. This is no ghost story. It is a place outside time, a prison and a throne, a realm where the vanished are held and the living are drawn. The lights flicker in the city above, shadows lengthen, and the cold seeps upward like a warning. The Blackmore estate was torn down, its ground salted to kill any growth, any life that might root itself there again. But the stain remains. The music still plays. The dance goes on. Evelyn is not gone. She is beneath. Beneath the floorboards, beneath the earth, beneath the veil of reality itself. And the pull she exerts is a force that can unmake a man, erase a memory, steal a soul. This is the darkness you've been summoned to see, not distant, not myth, but alive and waiting. Knowledge is a blade with two edges. Once you slice through the veil, there's no returning to the safety of ignorance. The world you knew fractures, splinters, and sharp shards of truth cut deeper than any wound. Men who have dared to peer behind the curtain of the Blackmore disappearances often find themselves isolated, cut off from old friends, from family, from the complacency that once held them safe. Paranoia takes root, a shadow that creeps into every corner of thought. Because once you see the machinery of control, every smile can hide a lie, every institution a trap. You begin to understand why so many who sought the truth vanish themselves, consumed by the weight of secrets too heavy for one man's shoulders. But there is a choice. To bow under the pressure and let the darkness claim you, or to stand firm, wielding knowledge as armor and weapon alike. The path of awakening is lonely and dangerous, but it is the only way out of the cage. It demands vigilance, courage, and a will unbreakable. Remember, every ritual, every mask, every whispered secret is a test, a challenge to your resolve, because the deeper you fall, the more the darkness will try to pull you under. But those who resist become more than men, they become sentinels at the edge of the abyss, keepers of truths that must not be forgotten. So I ask you now, are you ready to become that man, to carry the burden and face the shadows without flinching? This is the final truth they never wanted you to know. The disappearances of the millionaire's wives were not isolated tragedies. They are part of a living covenant, a blood oath sealed in shadows that still binds the city to this day. Long after the Blackmore estate was razed, long after the gates rusted and the maps erased its place, the pact endures. A silent agreement whispered between the powerful, a contract written in sacrifice, sealed with silence. The wives who vanished were tokens in a game played by those who pull strings behind curtains of gold and velvet. Their names erased, their stories buried beneath layers of lies. But their spirits, trapped between worlds, continue to move unseen, their whispers carried on the wind beneath the city's streets. And you, sitting where you are now, have been pulled into the web. Because this pact demands awareness, a price paid in vigilance. Those who forget are doomed to become pawns. Those who remember are hunted. You may feel eyes on you now because you are being watched, not by strangers, but by the unseen watchers born from the same shadows that claimed Evelyn and the others. They observe your every move, waiting for doubt, waiting for weakness. But now you hold the key, the knowledge they fear most. The veil is lifted, the truth is revealed. The question remains, what will you do with it? Will you walk away, back into the comforting dark, or will you stand, unbroken, a sentinel in the endless night? Because once you've seen what lies beneath, once you've felt the cold breath of the abyss, there is no going back. The legacy of the Millionaire's Wives is not just a story of disappearance, it is a warning, a summons. The darkness watches, the city waits, and the choice is yours. Remember your oath. Veil lifted, truth revealed. Speak it now, twice, and seal your place in the shadowed fold. The journey ends here, but your awakening has only just begun.